The Valkyrie Dominion had ruled the Orion Arm for 12,000 years. And in all that time, they had never once questioned their place at the top of the galactic food chain. Their empire stretched across hundreds of worlds, each one conquered and cataloged with the same cold efficiency that had made them the most feared species in known. Space High Taxonomist Salith sat in her observation chamber aboard the research vessel Silent Fang, her 4 eyes scanning the data streams that flowed across her display screens. She was old by Valkyrie standards, her scales having faded from bright crimson to a dull rust color that spoke of centuries spent classifying the countless species the Dominion had encountered. Her job was simple: look at a new species and determine what they were. They predators worthy of respect and careful conquest, or were they prey to be harvested and used as the Dominion saw fit? In 600 years of service, Salith had never made a wrong classification. The probe data from the small blue world called Earth had been arriving for several cycles now, and Salith found herself almost bored by what she saw. The dominant species called themselves humans, and by every measure the Valkyrie used, they were utterly unremarkable. She pulled up the biological analysis and let out a soft hiss of amusement. No natural armor of any kind, no claws worth mentioning, venom glands or toxic secretions. Their teeth were flat and weak, designed for grinding plants rather than tearing flesh. Their skin was so soft that even minor impacts left colorful bruises on their bodies. They had no protective scales, no hardened shell, nothing to shield them from the dangers of their world. Remarkable, Salith muttered to her assistant, a young male named Korath, who stood at attention nearby. How did these creatures even survive long enough to build cities? Korath leaned forward to examine the data, his yellow eyes narrowing with interest. They appear to cluster together in large groups. High Taxonomist, he observed. Perhaps they use numbers to compensate for their individual weakness. Salith flicked her tail in dismissal. Common prey adaptation, she said. Herd animals do the same thing on 1,000 worlds. She continued scrolling through the data, looking for anything that might change her initial assessment. The humans built their settlements in open areas, which suggested they feared ambush from forests and mountains. They illuminated their cities at night with artificial light, which clearly indicated a fear of darkness and the predators that hunted within it. They kept other animals in captivity for food rather than hunting them, which showed they lacked the killer instinct necessary for true predation. They covered their bodies with artificial materials, proving they could not survive their own planets. Climate without assistance. Every single data point confirmed what Salith already believed. These humans were prey animals who had somehow stumbled into intelligence. They had built technology not because they were clever, but because they were desperate. Without their tools, they would be nothing more than soft, slow meals for any real predator. Salith entered her classification into the official record with the confidence of someone who had done this thousands of times before. Species: human, she dictated. Planet of origin: Earth, Sol system. Classification: Category 7. Passive herbivore adjacent. Threat level: negligible. Recommendation: suitable for harvest and agricultural labor. Estimated resistance capacity: minimal. Projected acquisition timeline: 6 standard rotations. Korath looked uncertain for a moment. High Taxonomist, I noticed something in the cultural data that seemed unusual, he said carefully, knowing that questioning a superior was dangerous. The humans appear to have a great deal of violence in their history. Salith waved a clawed hand dismissively. All intelligent species fight amongst themselves, she said. Even prey animals compete for resources. The fact that they fight each other only proves they lack the ability to threaten a true predator. When the Dominion arrives, they will submit or they will die. Either outcome serves our purposes. A report was transmitted to the Dominion High Command that same cycle, And the response came back within days. A small acquisition fleet would be dispatched to claim Earth and its inhabitants. Operation was considered so routine that it was assigned to Warlord Ketharan, a mid-ranked commander who needed experience managing colonial acquisitions. His fleet consisted of only 3 cruisers and a support vessel, carrying a total of 4,000 ground troops. It was the minimum force the Dominion would send to claim any inhabited world. And even that was considered excessive for a category 7 species. Ketharan himself was not particularly impressive by Velthor standards. He was young and ambitious, his scales still bright with the purple coloring of prime adulthood. He had won his rank through political connections rather than battlefield glory, and this mission was supposed to be an easy way to add a conquest to his record. His officers joked among themselves that the hardest part of the mission would be staying awake during the occupation as his fleet prepared to enter. Faster than light travel, Ketharan addressed his crew with the casual arrogance that defined Veltari military culture. Warriors of the Dominion, he announced over the ship-wide communication system, we travel to claim a world of soft creatures who have never known true fear. They have no weapons that can threaten us, no defenses that can stop us, and no warriors that can stand against us. This will not be a battle. This will be a harvest. When we return, we will bring with us a new agricultural species to serve the Dominion's needs. Glory to the hunt. His crew responded with the traditional Velthari war cry, their voices echoing through the metal corridors of the warships. None of them knew that they were about to make first contact with the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. None of them suspected that the soft, weak, defenseless humans had been waiting for this moment for their entire existence as a species, and none of them could have imagined that in the weeks to come, they would learn the true meaning of fear. The fleet jumped to faster than light speed, carrying 4,000 Velthari warriors toward their destiny in the cold depths of space. The stars watched in silence as predators flew toward prey that were not prey at all. The humans were waiting. They had always been waiting, and they were very, very hungry. The Velthari fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system, and Warlord Ketharan immediately ordered his communication officers to broadcast the standard submission. The message was simple and had been used on countless worlds. The 4 inhabitants of this world, they broadcast declared in translated human languages, you have been claimed by the Velthari Dominion. Lay down any weapons you possess and prepare for processing. Resistance will result in death. Compliance will be rewarded with continued existence. The Velthari expected immediate surrender, as they had received from dozens of other species. Instead, the humans responded with a flood of confused transmissions. Some human governments demanded to know who the Velthari were. Others asked for diplomatic discussions. A few broadcast threats that made the Velthari officers laugh out loud. One small nation even tried to offer the Velthari a trade. Agrimenkith Arn watched these responses with growing amusement. They do not even understand what is happening to them, he said to his second-in-command, a scarred female named Valeth. They think this is a negotiation. Valeth bared her fangs in the Velthari equivalent of a smile. They will learn soon enough. My lord, she said, shall I order the dropships to launch? Ketharan nodded, and within the hour, 20 dropships descended toward Earth's surface. Their target was a rural region in the northern part of a large continent, far from major population centers. Plan was to establish a secure landing zone and begin capturing humans for study and classification. Dropships landed in a place the humans called Montana. It was a land of mountains and forests and wide open spaces. And the Velthari ground commander, a veteran named Vithos, thought it would be an easy area to control his soldiers spread out in standard patrol formations. their plasma rifles ready for any sign of resistance. For the first few hours, everything seemed normal. The Velthari encountered some humans fleeing in primitive ground vehicles, and they captured several dozen for transport back to the ships. The humans screamed and cried and begged, exactly as prey animals were supposed to. Davithus allowed himself to relax. This was going to be even easier than expected. Then his scouts began reporting strange findings. The first report came from a team that had entered a human dwelling in search of supplies. Commander, the scout's voice crackled over the communication device. There's something here you need to see. Davithus traveled to the location and stepped inside the human structure. What he found made him stop in his tracks. The walls were covered with the mounted heads of animals, not small animals, but large predators with massive fangs and sharp claws. Bears, wolves, large cats with golden fur and terrifying teeth. All of them had been killed, and their heads had been preserved as decorations. What is this? Davithus whispered, his scales turning pale with unease. His scout pointed to a series of images on the wall. They showed a human male standing over the bodies of these same predators, holding a weapon and smiling. The human was not running from these creatures. The human had hunted them. The human had killed them for enjoyment and displayed their bodies as trophies. Davithus felt the first cold touch of doubt in his chest. He moved through the dwelling, finding more disturbing evidence with every step. There was a room filled with weapons of various sizes and types. Not military weapons, but personal weapons that this single human owned for recreation. There were images of the human's offspring holding smaller weapons, learning to shoot at targets. There were preserved skins of predators stretched on the walls. There was a collection of teeth and claws taken from killed animals. This was not the home of a prey creature. This was the home of something else entirely. Davithus tried to report his findings to the fleet, but before he could complete his transmission, he heard the sound of weapons fire in the distance. Then he heard screaming. Not human screaming, Velthari screaming. He ran outside to find chaos. Humans had appeared from the forest, moving with a speed and coordination that should have been impossible for a prey species. They carried primitive projectile weapons that fired metal at incredible velocities, and these weapons were tearing through Velthari armor like it was made of paper. Davithus watched in horror as 3 of his soldiers fell in rapid succession, their bodies torn apart by human bullets. Return fire! He screamed, raising his own plasma rifle, but the humans were already gone, melting back into the trees like shadows. One moment they were there, and the next moment they had vanished. More attacks came throughout the night. The humans struck from darkness, from concealment, from angles the Velthari never expected. They did not fight like prey animals desperately defending themselves. They fought like hunters, stalking their targets. They set traps that killed Velthari soldiers with mechanical efficiency. They used explosives hidden in the ground to destroy vehicles. They shot officers from distances so great that the Velthari never even saw them by morning. Davithus had lost half of his ground force. He stood among the bodies of his fallen warriors and tried to understand what had happened. These humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to be soft and slow and helpless, but they had killed Velthari soldiers with a skill and ferocity that Davithus had never seen in any prey species. Finally managed to send a transmission to the fleet. Warlord Kataran, he said, his voice shaking, we've made a terrible mistake. These creatures are not prey. They are hunters. They are hunters who have been pretending to be prey above the planet. Kataran received the message and felt the first stirrings of real concern. He looked at the tactical display showing the positions of his ground forces, and he watched as more and more of them disappeared from the screen in a small farmhouse in Montana. An elderly human male reloaded, his rifle and looked out at the forest where his neighbors had gathered. His grandfather had fought in a great human war. His father had fought in another war, and now it was his turn. He did not know what these alien creatures wanted, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. They had come to his home. They had threatened his family, and he was going to make them regret that the Valkyrie were not the hunters. They were the hunted, and they did not even know it yet. High Taxinemus Salith arrived with the reinforcement fleet 3 weeks after the initial invasion began, and what she found shocked her to her core. The original 3 cruisers were damaged and limping in orbit. 40% of the ground forces were dead or missing. The surviving Valkyrie soldiers refused to leave their fortified positions, and the humans had not surrendered. They had not even considered surrendering. Instead, they had organized themselves into hunting packs that roamed the countryside, killing any Valkyrie who dared to step outside the landing zones. Elith demanded a full briefing from the surviving officers, and what she learned changed everything she thought she knew about the universe. The humans were not like any species the Dominion had ever encountered. They were not ambush predators like the Valkyrie, who attacked with explosive speed and overwhelming force. They were something far more terrifying. They were persistence predators. Commander Vithos, who had somehow survived the initial weeks of fighting, explained it to her with haunted eyes. "They do not stop," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We run, and they follow. We hide, and they find us. We fight, and they retreat. But they always come back. They never stop following." Salith pulled up the historical and biological data on humans that she had dismissed so carelessly before this time. She read more carefully, and this time she understood millions of years ago, humans had evolved on the hot grasslands of their home continent. They had no claws or fangs or venom. They had no speed or strength or armor. What they had was endurance. Their bodies were designed to regulate heat through sweating, a biological adaptation that seemed disgusting and weak at first glance, but this adaptation allowed humans to keep moving in conditions that would cause other animals to overheat and collapse. Ancient humans had hunted by following their prey for hours or even days, never letting it rest, never letting it escape, slowly wearing it down until it simply could not run anymore. Then they moved in for the kill. This was not the hunting style of a desperate prey animal. This was the hunting style of a nightmare, and now the Valkyrie were experiencing it firsthand. The human forces did not try to win decisive battles. They did not throw themselves against Valkyrie positions in suicidal charges. Instead, they watched and waited and probed. They attacked supply lines and isolated patrols. They killed sentries in the night and disappeared before anyone could respond. They forced the Valkyrie to stay alert at all times, never allowing them to rest, never allowing them to feel safe. The Valkyrie soldiers were exhausted. They were terrified, and they were dying, one by one, picked off by an enemy that refused to play by the rules of civilized warfare. Salith spent days reviewing combat footage and intelligence reports, and what she saw made her scales turn white with fear. The humans adapted to Valkyrie tactics faster than any species she had ever studied. When the Valkyrie used thermal sensors to detect hidden humans, the humans learned to mask their heat signatures with mud and cold water. When the Valkyrie set up defensive perimeters, the humans dug tunnels underneath them. When the Valkyrie called in air support, the humans shot down the aircraft with missiles launched from hidden positions. Every time the Valkyrie developed a new strategy, the humans found a counter within days. It was as if they had been training for this moment their entire existence. And then Salith discovered the most terrifying truth of all of us. Humans were still fighting each other, even as they battled the alien invasion. Human nations maintained their own conflicts and rivalries. They argued about strategy and leadership and resource allocation. They competed to see who could kill more. Valkyrie soldiers, they turned the war into a contest. A game, a form of entertainment. This was not the behavior of a species fighting for survival. This was the behavior of a species that enjoyed fighting, a species that had evolved to view combat as a natural and even pleasurable activity. Lith called an emergency meeting with Warlord Catharan and the newly arrived fleet commander. Azrath, we must withdraw, she said bluntly, abandoning all protocol. These creatures cannot be conquered, Catharan hissed with anger. I will not retreat from a planet of soft-skinned primitives. He snarled. Send more troops. Burn their cities from orbit. They will submit or they will die. But Azrath, who was older and wiser than Catharan, studied Salith with thoughtful eyes. Tell me more. Taxonomist, he said quietly. What exactly are we dealing with? Salith activated a holographic display showing human history. They have been waging war against each other for their entire recorded history, she said. They have killed billions of their own kind in conflicts over territory, resources, and ideology. They developed weapons capable of destroying entire cities in single explosions. They created poisons that could kill millions of people at once. They built machines specifically designed to cause maximum suffering to other humans. She paused, her four eyes meeting Azrath's gaze. And they did all of this to each other, she continued. To members of their own species. Imagine what they will do to us. The holographic display showed images from human wars. Trenches filled with dead bodies. Cities reduced to rubble. Mushroom clouds rising over burning landscapes. They did not evolve to be prey, Salith concluded. They evolved to be the most efficient killers their planet had ever seen. Their lack of natural weapons is not a weakness. It is proof that they did not need natural weapons. They built better ones. They always build better ones. Azrath was silent for a long moment. Then he turned to Catharan. How many soldiers do we have left on the ground? He asked. Approximately 2,000 combat-ready troops, Catharan admitted. The rest are wounded or suffering from what the medical officers are calling psychological collapse. Azrath nodded slowly. And how many humans are fighting against us? Catharan checked his datapad. Our estimates suggest between 10 and 15,000 active combatants in the immediate area, he said. But more are arriving every day. They are coming from all over the planet. They are volunteering to fight us. Azrath looked at the tactical display showing Earth below them somewhere down there. Millions of humans were watching the skies, waiting for the next Volturi move, and they were not afraid. They were eager. Prepare for full-scale orbital bombardment. Azrath ordered. If we cannot take this world, we will destroy it. But even as he gave the order, he knew in his heart that it would not be enough. These humans were not going to give up. They were never going to give up. They had been hunting for millions of years, and now they had found new prey. Fleet Commander Azrath had expected the orbital bombardment to break the humans. He had expected them to see their cities burning and their people dying and finally understand that resistance was pointless. He had expected surrender. What he got instead was the single most terrifying display of unified aggression the Velthari Dominion had ever witnessed within hours of the first bombardment. Human nations that had been rivals for centuries began sharing military intelligence. Governments that had pointed nuclear weapons at each other for generations suddenly turned those weapons toward space manufacturing. Facilities that had been producing consumer goods switched to weapons production with a speed that should have been impossible, and humans began volunteering for military service in numbers that made Azrath's blood run cold. The Velthari reinforcement fleet had brought 20,000 fresh soldiers. the largest ground force the Dominion had deployed to a single world in over a century within 2 weeks. The humans had assembled an army of 3 million and more were coming every day. Salith watched the human response from her observation station and finally understood what made this species so dangerous. They are hypersocial pack predators. She said to Azrath during one of their many strategy meetings, "We assumed their tendency to gather in groups was a prey response, a defensive behavior. We were wrong. They gather in groups because that is how they hunt. A single human is vulnerable. Pack of humans is dangerous, but a swarm of humans united against a common enemy?" She paused, searching for words to describe what she was seeing. They become something else entirely. She finally said, "They become a force of nature. They become extinction." The ground war had become a nightmare beyond anything the Velthari had experienced. Human forces attacked from every direction, using tactics that range from sophisticated military operations to brutal guerrilla warfare. Some humans wore uniforms and followed traditional military structures. Others fought in civilian clothes, appearing as innocent bystanders until the moment. They drew hidden weapons and opened fire. The Velthari could not tell which humans were soldiers and which were not, because in truth, they were all soldiers, every single one of them. Even the children knew how to shoot. Even the elderly maintained weapons in their homes. The entire species was built for war. Azrath ordered increased orbital bombardment, hoping to terrorize the humans into submission instead. The humans responded with something that made his tactical officers gasp in disbelief. They launched spacecraft, not sophisticated warships with advanced technology. These were crude missiles, barely more than rockets strapped to explosive warheads. They should have been easy to destroy. The Velthari point defense systems were designed to intercept far more advanced threats, but the humans did not launch 1 missile or 10 missiles or even 100 missiles. They launched thousands. They launched every rocket they had ever built. They stripped the warheads from their nuclear weapons and pointed them at the sky. They converted civilian spacecraft into suicide bombers. They filled the space around Earth with so much debris and so many projectiles that the Velthari sensors could barely distinguish real threats from decoys. 2 Velthari cruisers were destroyed in the first wave. A third was crippled when a human missile packed with nuclear material detonated against its hull. Azrath watched his fleet being torn apart by creatures who had only achieved spaceflight within living memory. And he felt something he had never experienced in 3 centuries of military service. He felt genuine fear. How are they doing this? He demanded, his claws digging into the armrest of his command chair. Their technology is primitive. They should not be able to touch us. Salith had the answer, but he would not like it. They are not more advanced than us. She said, they are more willing. They will sacrifice anything to win. They will pay any price. They do not count the cost. They only count the enemy dead. She pulled up data showing the human casualty figures. Millions had died in the bombardment. Hundreds of thousands more had died in ground combat, and still they fought. Still they volunteered. Still they built weapons and trained soldiers and launched missiles into space. They call it total war. Salith explained. It is a concept they developed while fighting each other. They believe that in certain conflicts, no sacrifice is too great. No tactic is forbidden. No price is too high. They will burn their own world to ashes before they let us take it. Azrath absorbed this information in silence. He had conquered a dozen worlds in his career. He had defeated species that were stronger than the Velthari, faster than the Velthari, more numerous than the Velthara, but he had never faced an enemy like this. An enemy that simply would not stop, an enemy that viewed death as an acceptable trade for victory, an enemy that seemed to actually enjoy the fighting that night. Azrath composed a message to the Dominion High Command. It was the most difficult report he had ever written. This species cannot be conquered through military force. He wrote, they adapt too quickly, fight too fiercely, and sacrifice too willingly. Technology advantages are being neutralized by their numbers and their determination. Our soldiers are suffering psychological breakdowns at unprecedented rates. Our fleet has sustained damage that will take years to repair. I recommend immediate withdrawal of all Velthari forces from this system. I further recommend that humanity be reclassified as a significant threat to Dominion security. These creatures are not prey. They are not even typical predators. They are something we have never encountered before. And if we continue this war, I believe they will find a way to bring it to our homeworlds. He paused before adding his final recommendation. Do not engage this species. Avoid all contact. Pray to whatever gods you believe in that they never develop faster than light travel, because if they do, they will come for us, and they will not stop until one of our species is extinct. He sent the message and then turned to look at the blue world spinning below his damaged fleet. Down there, millions of humans were celebrating their victories. They were treating the war like a game they were winning. They were enjoying themselves, and Azrath knew with terrible certainty that this was only the beginning. The humans had tasted alien blood. They had learned that there was prey among the stars, and they would never forget it. The Grand Chamber of the Velthari Dominion Council had not been this full in over 1,000 years. 12 Supreme Counselors sat in their ancient seats of power, their scales painted with the ceremonial colors of judgment. Behind them, hundreds of military commanders, scientists, and political advisors filled the observation galleries, and before them all stood High Taxonomist Salith, the female who had made the most catastrophic classification error in Dominion history. You may speak, the first counselor said, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. Explain to us how you failed so completely. Salith had prepared for this moment during the long journey back from Earth. She had reviewed every piece of data, analyzed every battle report, studied every scrap of information about the human species, and she had come to conclusions that would change the Dominion forever. Honored counselors, she began, her voice steady despite her fear. I did not fail in my classification. I was deceived. We were all deceived. Because the humans are the greatest predators the galaxy has ever produced. Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. Explain, the first counselor demanded. Zelith activated her holographic display, filling the chamber with images from Earth. When I first examined the humans, I saw everything you would expect from a prey species, she said. Soft bodies, no natural weapons, fear of darkness, herd behavior. But I missed the most important detail. I missed what made them this way. She changed the display to show ancient Earth, populated by massive creatures that made even Velthari look small. Millions of years ago, Earth was home to megafauna, giant predators with claws and fangs and armored hides, she explained. Creatures that should have hunted the weak, soft humans to extinction, but they did not, because the humans hunted them first. The display showed images of early humans working together to bring down animals 10 times their size. The humans did not need claws because they made spears. Salith continued. They did not need armor because they made shields. They did not need speed because they simply followed their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They did not need strength because they hunted in packs that could bring down any creature, no matter how powerful. And when they ran out of megafauna to hunt, she paused for effect. They drove them to extinction. The display changed again, showing a timeline of species that humans had eliminated from their world. Every major predator that competed with humans is now extinct, Salith said. The giant cats that could have torn them apart are gone. The massive bears that could have crushed them are gone. The prehistoric wolves that could have overwhelmed them are gone. The humans killed them. All not for food, not for survival, but because they refused to share their world with anything that might threaten them. The chamber was silent now, every eye fixed on Salith. And then, she said, a voice dropping to barely above a whisper, they started hunting each other. The display filled with images from human history, wars, genocides, weapons of mass destruction. They built weapons capable of destroying their entire planet, Salith said. They actually used them. They killed hundreds of millions of their own kind in conflicts that spanned their entire world. Developed biological agents that could wipe out their species. They split the atom and turned it into a weapon. They did all of this to each other. She looked at the council with all four of her eyes. And when we arrived, when we threatened them, when we tried to conquer them, they stopped fighting each other. They united. They turned all of that violence, all of that creativity, all of that relentless determination toward a single goal, destroying us. The first counselor leaned forward. What are you suggesting, taxonomist? I am suggesting nothing, Salith replied. I am stating a fact. The humans are not prey. They are not merely predators. They are the apex species of their world. And they achieved that status by eliminating everything else that competed with them. They are the monsters that other monsters fear. They are the reason their planet fell silent. They are extinction made flesh. She changed the display one final time, showing the current state of the human species. And now they know we exist, she said. They know there are other species in the galaxy. They know there is more prey among the stars, and they are already building ships to come find it. The chamber erupted in chaos. Counselors shouting questions and accusations. Military commanders demanding information about human capabilities. The first counselor raised his hand for silence. What is your recommendation, taxonomist? He asked, his voice heavy with dread. Salith stood straighter and spoke the words she had been dreading since she first understood what humans truly were. I recommend immediate reclassification of the human species, she said. Current designation: Category 7. Passive herbivore adjacent, proposed designation. Category 0. Gasps filled the chamber. Category 0 was the highest threat classification the Dominion had ever created. It had only been assigned twice in 12,000 years, once to the Velthri themselves, and once to the long-extinct Varax hive that had nearly destroyed the Dominion in ancient times. Category 0, Salith repeated. Apex predator. Existential threat. Recommended action: avoid all contact. Establish exclusion zone of minimum 500 light-years around Sol system. Do not approach. Do not communicate. Do not provoke. She took a deep breath before delivering her final words. And pray that we retreated in time. Pray that they do not follow us home. Because if they do, if they ever learn to cross the stars the way we do, they will not stop at reconquest. They will not stop at revenge. They will not stop at all. That is what they are. That is what they have always been. They are the hunters. And now, for the first time in their existence, they have found prey worthy of the chase. The Dominion Council voted unanimously to accept the reclassification within days. Every Velthri vessel had withdrawn from human space within weeks. The exclusion zone had been established and enforced, and in the highest levels of Dominion government, a new doctrine was quietly adopted. The doctrine of silent retreat if the humans ever appeared in Dominion space. All Velthri vessels were to withdraw immediately without engaging no contact, no communication, no provocation. Just run and hide and hope the humans found something else to hunt on Earth. Humanity celebrated its victory over the alien invaders. They built monuments to their fallen heroes. They studied the captured Velthri technology with hungry eyes, and they looked up at the stars. With a new understanding, they were not alone in the universe. There was life out there, life that had tried to hunt them, life that had learned the truth too late. Humanity was not the Prey humanity had never been the prey, and now humanity knew there was a whole galaxy full of species that had not yet learned that lesson. The stars were calling and the hunters were ready to answer.